listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. How to sell more music, get more people to your shows, and make more money in the music business. Here's your host, music marketer, and author of the book Six Figure Musician, David Hooper. Joining David is his co-host, Wendy Wallace.
This is the musicmarketing.com podcast. My name is David Hooper. I'm the founder of musicmarketing.com. And with me today from Toronto, Canada, Wendy Wallace.
Hey, it's good to be back.
I know. We had an old musicmarketing.com podcast. When was that?
You know what? I was going to go and check to see when the last podcast we did was, I don't know, it was maybe like 2-3 years ago. 2-3.
I mean, in internet years, that's like about 2 or 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
So we are back. Again, my name is David Hooper. I'm the founder of musicmarketing.com. We're a marketing agency based out of Nashville, Tennessee. You may know me from Music Business Radio, which is a different show. It's a broadcast radio show, similar to this one, but not as nitty-gritty. And also, I'm the author of Six Figure Musician. You can download it free at musicianbook.com. And speaking of Six Figure Musician, Wendy, we've been working together for about 6 years. And Wendy, you helped me a lot on Six Figure Musician. You know that book inside and out. You were the first person actually to read it, and you kept sending it back to me. You were the editor on it and made me rewrite it about 7 times. So
that's true.
You know the book, Six Figure Musician, and you know music marketing because you've been working with me for about 6 years, and that's what we're going to be discussing today and for the next several weeks, however long we do this, is music marketing.
Yes. So, I'm kind of curious about the book. How has reaction been to the book so far?
Well, the book has been out 4 weeks and a few days, and the reaction has been very good. Very good. We're doing something different, giving it away for free, and hoping that people will buy it if they really like it. But it has been a great reaction. I think people really like it. It's certainly opened up a lot of speaking engagements. I've kind of come out of not really hiding. I mean, I've been doing music marketing the whole time over the last few years, but it's been a while since I've had a book, and I've been working on different client projects and various projects of my own. So I feel like I've come out of the cave, and I'm doing a lot of interviews now, and the reaction has been wonderful.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I'm working on different projects, right? So you're the one who gets all the feedback about the book. People are emailing you and interacting with you. And one of the things that we'll talk about probably in a future podcast is something that you're going through right now, which I think many musicians go through, in that you went away to create something and you didn't, necessarily completely stay in touch with your audience. I mean, you were writing blog posts here and there, but you weren't as necessarily, active as you normally would because you were busy writing the book. And then you come back with this product or this book, and now you're wanting to reconnect with people and really wanting, to know what they, feeling excited about the book and the project and wanting to get that feedback and having to really work. It's a different thing going from creating to marketing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the reasons that I kind of did take a break from at least my public work. I mean, we're still doing marketing in the meantime. We've got to keep the agency running. But yeah, it's a totally different like part of the brain, I would imagine, like a left brain, right brain thing, where you've got to think about your marketing, and then when you're thinking about maybe making a record, think about the creation process of it. And I think that's one of the things that makes music so exciting. Being a musician or being a writer, you have different things that you can switch back and forth from. It's not just the creative and it's not just the marketing. Some people don't like that, but that's really what we're here to talk about is that one part of it, to help the musicians who are into the creative mode, to get them onto the marketing and maybe make that a little bit more exciting to them.
Right. So what kind of things are you doing to promote the book?
Well, a lot more interviews. This week we have the Worldwide Musician Meetup Day, which is very exciting. Right now, 27 various music business communities around the world, and they will all be getting together at the same time and discussing music marketing. We've got an outline that everybody's going to be following, and my goal is to help get those people together and talking so we can do gig swaps and just swap good ideas. I mean, Wendy, you and I are on the front lines of this music marketing thing, but we don't know it all. Certainly having hundreds and hundreds of bands sharing ideas, we can maybe take something that's not working for them and help them make it work a little bit better, or take something that is working and spread it to other people so everybody can benefit from it. So I'm doing that, doing a lot of interviews on the receiving end of the interviews, the interviewee as opposed to the interviewer, which is what I do on Music Business Radio, and basically getting myself out there a whole lot more than I'm used to. I'm definitely a behind-the-scenes guy. That's the reason I'm not a musician still.
It's kind of interesting that you mentioned the meetup thing, because I have kind of a different perspective on, face-to-face kind of interaction, especially when it comes to musicians. And I wanted to actually talk to you about that within this podcast and get your thoughts on it. Because when we were working on the book, a lot of the times within the book, throughout the book, you say that it's like really, really important to play live. And unless I misinterpreted this, but my perception was that playing live is like the most important thing for a musician to do. And I often questioned that because I thought, I spend a lot of time on YouTube watching musicians, and I see these people, many people who are still making music in their living room or their bedroom and have acquired a huge following, and they have their music up on iTunes. And I don't know how well they're doing financially, but they seem to be consistently doing well, and at least well enough to continue doing their thing. And so I'm kind of curious about why it is that it's so important to play live. I get that there are a lot of rewards that come with playing live, but can you explain in terms of building an audience and winning over fans, why it's so important to play live?
Well, you mentioned it yourself that you have seen a lot of musicians on YouTube, as have I. That's one of the ways that music is being spread. But you could watch maybe 10, 20, 30 musicians per night if you wanted to, if you're a really big fan and wanted to sit there in front of your computer, as opposed to going out and seeing a musician live. That's a whole lot more memorable. Not only are you thinking just about the show, but you're thinking about the friends that you met on the way to the show, friends that you saw when you were there, what you did afterwards. Maybe you had a meal, maybe you had a drink. So there's more to the experience of seeing a band live. There's also a filter there that, as I mentioned, you can only see one band a night, maybe a couple. They're at the same club or a club is next door. So because of the filter, you're a whole lot more focused. You're seeing a lot more sensory use there. You can hear them, see them, touch them, taste them, feel them, as opposed to just watching and listening to them on YouTube. You can really experience it. And that's really the main reason as far as like an audience perspective. Now, from a band perspective, one of the great reasons is that you can make money while you're out there promoting. You can make money either via the cover or via a guaranteed fee, whichever point that you're at. Just throwing something up on YouTube, maybe you're going to make money through the YouTube partnership program, which I think is great. It didn't exist even just a few years ago, and it's a great income stream. But as far as actually making real money, let's say you had 100 people at $5 each, well, that's $500. It takes quite a bit to make that kind of money off of YouTube. And that doesn't even count what you could sell from the back of the room, such as T-shirts and your CDs. Okay.
So even though, like, you have people, I guess, I'm thinking, but what about those people who really want to pursue music, but they have really busy lives, or somehow their life is, restricted for whatever reason. They have a job or they have a family and they can't go out and tour, and maybe they can play some live venues here and there, but or some local venues here and there, but for the most part, they're kind of restricted when it comes to playing live. Are you still saying that it's still important to pursue those opportunities no matter how limited they may be, rather than just, staying in your house and putting your stuff up online?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the big thing that a lot of bands do say, well, I've got a job. Well, I've got a family. Well, I've got whatever, no money, whatever your excuse is. And sometimes people use that as an excuse from having to do the hard work, and it kind of lets them off the hook. But the truth is, if you really want this, you're going to find a way. If you don't want it, you're going to find an excuse. So one of the things that you can do, not everybody, I understand it. You've got your life in order. You can't hit the road, you probably shouldn't hit the road because you don't have the fan base to actually sustain hitting the road. But you can play live gigs, even if it's just an open mic. Get more comfortable at it and start building that up. Play locally, maybe go on something on the weekend. Everybody can do it at their capacity. It doesn't even have to be a full gig. Let's say you don't even have enough material to do a full gig. Well, do an opening gig. Don't let any of these excuses stop you from getting out and connecting with people, because that is where music fans are made, in the clubs.
So then what I'm also hearing you say is that when it comes to playing a live gig, like a musician has like two things that they need to be thinking about. One, playing great, and two, connecting with fans, right? And so can you kind of give some tips on how to best connect with fans in various, live venue settings?
You know what? Let's zoom out a little bit on a live venue setting, and let's think about all the people that you have to connect with first, because it's not just the fans. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that fans think about. Fans and bands, it has to rhyme, doesn't it? That's one of the things that bands think about. They just think about the fans. But the truth is you've got to connect with various people when you're in a live setting. Booker, club owner, bartenders, sound man, the audience, which is your fans, people are there to see you, but also the regulars at the bar. And I'll go through these one-on-one, and we'll talk about how we can connect to them in a better way. And then we can talk about maybe more specifics on how to take that connection offline and continue it until you get back to the venue. Does that sound good?
Yeah. So I'm thinking like there's two different scenarios. Okay. So you have all of those people that you just mentioned, right? So what if, let's look at this from two different ways. How do you best connect with those people if they are connected to a club that's in your hometown?
Okay.
So you might have some familiarity with them. You might know people, or people know people, or, that kind of thing.
Well, it's really kind of the same way when you think about it. I mean, if it's in your hometown, you've got the situation where maybe they've heard of you, you've heard of them, you can go check them out easily. Maybe you've got mutual friends that can make the introduction to you, which I think adds a lot. But at the end of the day, you still have to connect with them in the same way, and that's really what I'm going to talk about. Although, certainly, I do believe in starting where you are. If nothing else, you don't have to travel that much to learn the lessons.
Okay.
That way you don't get on the road and you're in Los Angeles and you're stuck out in Iowa somewhere, and you learn a lesson, you have a bad gig, and then you got to go all the way back out to Los Angeles. And you want to learn it close to home, fail fast, fail often. And I think because the people are local, not that you want to necessarily burn bridges in your own hometown or make a lot of mistakes there, but because you're local and because you're trying, people are going to be a whole lot more forgiving of you. And using these techniques that I'm talking about, which is really just a systematic approach for getting connected with people in the club and people that work in the club, I think that you're going to find that the club scene is a whole lot more forgiving than maybe you've experienced, or maybe you haven't experienced. Maybe you've heard other bands talking about it, and I think that it's one of those things kind of like your grandparents used to tell you, well, I used to walk uphill both ways to school, and it was snowing, and we didn't have any shoes, and they start telling these stories, and bands can do the same thing. They talk about these bad bookers. You never hear anybody talk about the really great people at clubs, and it's been my experience that there are a lot of them. So let's dig into that, and I'll start with the booker. If you think about what the booker wants when he's going to make a decision whether or not to have your band at the club, he wants to look good in front of the guy who owns the club. He wants to look good in front of the staff. He needs to have people in the audience, because the people in the audience are going to pay, and when they pay, the owner makes money, and when they pay, the staff is busy and the staff makes money. So that's going to be your first thing, to approach it from a booker standpoint. Yeah, he's thinking about your music, but you really want to connect with him, showing him that you understand what it is that he's looking for. And he's looking for people in his club who are going to spend money. So that's going to be the first part of getting connected with these clubs. Secondly, the club owner. Now, the club owner wants a happy staff. You may not have a dealing with the club owner, or you may. Sometimes the club owner is also the bartender. Sometimes the club owner is also the guy who's doing the booking. But if you happen to run into the club owner, it kind of goes back to what that booking agent is thinking. he needs a staff that is going to go home with a pocket full of money because he wants to keep his staff happy. He wants to keep the good staff coming back where they're not going to just bail on him. When you know this from being out in clubs and just being around food or restaurants or bartending or any of that kind of nature, that's a very transient position. It's not uncommon for one person just to kind of flip from one bar to the next or one club to the next. And, that costs a club owner money. So if you can keep his staff happy, you're going to help him out with that. He also doesn't want to deal with jerks. Let me say that too. And this goes for really everybody. I mean, you got to understand that what it is that he's looking for. But even if you can bring all those things to him, if you're going to be a jerk, there are a lot of bands out there that want to get gigs, and he doesn't necessarily have to deal with jerks. Now, if it's something like Lady Gaga, or if it's Justin Bieber or whatever, it's going to kind of put his club on the map and maybe help that out. He's a little bit more likely to deal with them. And if your name is Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, go for it. But even then, those guys have their ups and downs, and I think being kind goes a long way. So that's just something to be mentioned here. You would think that it's obvious, and it probably is to 99% of people, but I still see bands just thinking like because they wrote 12 good songs that the world owes them something, or a club owes them something. And that is certainly not the case, and the club won't owe you anything. So,
one of the things, the marketing, and a rule of thumb, for lack of better words, is that you always show people that you can give them value, right? You prove that to them. So are you saying the same thing, that musicians should approach bookers or club owners and be friendly and be nice, but also keep in mind that you want to prove to them that you have something of value to offer?
Yeah, just keep in mind their needs, and their need is not to get a great band in there. Their need is to have a band that's going to bring people in, and not only just people, but people that are going to spend money. This is not about music, and I think that is where a lot of bands get confused. It's about entertainment, and if you could get in there and cut a chicken's head off and dance around stage with no music and complete silence, but it brought in a crowd, those guys are going to book you.
Okay.
So let's talk about the club staff. The big one is going to be the bartenders. Bartenders are there to make money. It's usually like a cash gig. A lot of those guys are paycheck to paycheck, and they need to walk away with some money in their pocket. And I think that's one of the things that I don't see bands doing enough. You see it a lot in comedy clubs. If you want to see guys who really get this, go check out the comedy clubs, because they are very, very good to the bartenders. And in between jokes, hey, tip your bartenders, tip your waitresses. Sometimes you'll hear that at a music venue, but I don't hear it nearly enough. And I would say to do it, I don't know, if you're doing a full show, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times a night, make sure that the bartenders and the club staff know that you are on their side, and tell people to tip generously and tip often and keep those drinks flowing, and just basically the same thing you're doing, be nice. So any way that you can do that, I think is great. I've seen a lot of situations, Wendy, where the bartenders are kind of the go-to people for the booker, the go-to people for the club owner. Sometimes the club owner isn't even in the picture. The booking guy may not even be there. The frontline staff are the people that have to deal with the band. And those are a lot of times the guys that are making the decision whether or not the band is going to come back. And if they can see, even if you don't have a lot of people in the audience, if the bartenders can see that you're actually trying to work with them and help them to make more money, they're going to help you, get you back, even if you've got kind of a dumpy show there with just, a few people.
All right.
Sound man. Sound man is the guy who gets really no respect. A lot of times, no respect from the band, because they're going to get in there and they're going to mess with his stage and mess with his mics and do whatever it is that they want. And a lot of times, no respect from the audience, because he's just invisible. They're going to give the band the credit for sounding good. The only time the sound guy really gets any kind of attention is when the band doesn't sound good and the sound guy gets all the blame. Sometimes that's his fault, sometimes it's not. So I would say this: keep the sound man on your side. I like to tip him. I tip sound guys ahead of time. I would also say that probably the biggest thing is to stay out of his way, because that guy, it's his ship. Let him be the captain. He's going to mic you up however he thinks is best. I think those guys, for the most part, are open to it, but don't touch their mics or get permission before you mess with anything, and let them do it. The biggest thing that I see, and this is so stupid, this is like a Dale Carnegie 101, Wendy, is not knowing the sound guy's name. Where these guys will be on stage, they'll say, "Hey, sound guy, more guitar in the wedge." Hey, Tim, can I get a little more guitar in the wedge? That goes over so much better. Makes him on your team. He's like the fifth guy in the band, right? I think acknowledging him too, just like you're acknowledging the bar staff, just like you're acknowledging the club and anybody else who's working at it. Hey, isn't Tim doing a great job back there on the boards? Give him a hand, everybody. That goes a long way, because those guys really are it's kind of a thankless job. The only time people, as I mentioned, acknowledge the sound guys when it sounds like balls. So see what you can do just to try to make a friend with that guy. Buy him a drink afterwards, tip him ahead of time, get on his side. And there's a funny saying, don't get in a fight with somebody who buys ink by the barrel. Like, don't get in the fight with your local press, your local newspaper, because you're never going to win. They're just going to spew whatever they want to about you, right? And I think the sound guy is kind of that same guy when it comes to gigs, Wendy, in that you don't want to get into it with the sound guy, because you're on stage, you may think you sound great, and you may sound great in the wedges or your in-ear monitors or whatever you're using to hear yourself, but he can he can have a lot of fun with you out in the audience. So take care of the sound guy. That's one of the most overlooked people, and that's going to do it as far as the staff goes. Now, I will say this: you want to think about your audience, and I think that when you think about the guys I've just mentioned, the booker, the owner, the bartender, the sound man, those are the people that are adding to your audience's experience. It's not just you. So beyond anything that you're doing on stage, I think if for no other reason to think about the club staff is because they're the ones who are bringing your audience into the good experience that you want them to have. And another way you can do that, you personally, I think you can bring them into the show. I think any kind of giveaways, any kind of contest, anything that you can do that is going to also bring the club staff into the show. For example, giving away drink tickets. We talk a lot about that in the book. And again, it's at musicianbook.com. It's anything you can do to keep the club in money. If you can buy somebody a drink from the stage, that not only gives them money directly, and you can work that out ahead of time, and they can just bill you for whatever free drinks that you give away. But it also acknowledges, and this is so silly, Wendy, you would think this is really obvious, but if you are actually pointing to the bar, hey, Johnny, thanks for singing along with that here in the front row. Listen, next drink is on me. And go over there and see Clara at the bar. She's right over here to your left. She'll take care of you. But it acknowledges Clara. It kind of, a lot of this is circular. Do you see where I'm going with this? When you get into like acknowledgement, when you get into the flow of money, when you get into just like letting people know to tip their bartenders, when you get into spending money and just letting the audience know that there are actually drinks in the corner and Claire is the one serving them. Sometimes people are going to come to a show, they won't even know that a bar is there. That seems crazy, but some of these big clubs, they're 2 or 3 bars.
Yeah, the other thought that comes to mind when you say all of this stuff is that, especially if you're on tour and you're, a couple of thousand miles away from home, and you're in a club where you're playing to an audience who maybe have never heard of you, and you're feeling kind of lonely and maybe a little bit uncomfortable within the situation. And I would imagine that when you are friendly with the staff, that then you feel like you have allies, and then you start to feel like you're not alone.
You want allies, and that gets to the final people in the club that you want on your side, which are the regulars. Now, sometimes you're going to go to a club where they've got live music every night of the week. Sometimes live music is an annoyance to the regulars, especially if there's a game on, or especially if there's something else. So if you can kind of hang out before and after, if you can kind of be a regular yourself, if it's one of the local clubs, if you can go to that club, like let's say you're playing next Wednesday. Well, you go this Wednesday and you hang out at that same club, kind of seeing who's there, kind of getting a feel for the place. When you're not there, maybe go on some of the other nights and see how it is the other nights, just to kind of do research. That's really, really important. A lot of bands show up and they're like, hey, we're the band, it all centers around us. But it really doesn't. It really centers around the staff. It centers around the regulars. It centers around the sound guy and the guys that are going to be there the other 6 nights of the week when you're not playing. Mm-hmm. So I would say if you can get those guys on your side, certainly get them on your side. As a matter of fact, one way to do that, and this is huge, if you've got a guy there and it's kind of like, you remember that old it's a TV show, Cheers? Mm-hmm, where, mm-hmm. Like there's Norm, and Norm right. has like a bench there with his name on it. Yeah. And if you can get one of those regulars to actually announce you, somebody who's in with the club crowd, the guys that are just hanging out there, not just your fans, that's going to be like an endorsement for you that it's okay for the other guys to like you. And that's going to go a long way because, again, those guys are there the other 6 nights of the week. They're talking with the staff. They're spending their money there. And if they have a good experience, they're going to want to bring you back in.
Okay, but the other question that comes to mind, though, when you say all of this, before we talk about actually connecting with fans, is obviously you'd have to be like a really outgoing person to be making all these connections and getting along with everybody and knowing everyone's needs and what if you're just really shy? And what if you are tired, or what if, you're not getting a good vibe from the club owner or the venue in general? I mean, how do you get yourself to a point where you can be this open and friendly and fun?
I think you have to work into it. I think it's extremely difficult, especially when you're on the road. You talked earlier about me doing a lot of promotion for the book, and when I'm doing my 3rd interview for the day about the book, I've got to approach it just like the first one, just like the second one, and be that enthusiastic because those people haven't heard the information that I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same way when you come in contact with anybody. You've just got to develop that skill. Now, one of the things that you can't, I don't want shyness to be an excuse, but I will say this, is that usually if you're in a band situation, one of the guys is going to be better at publicity than other guys. You think about Guns N' Roses in the 80s, who did all the interviews? Was it the front man?
It was not. It was Slash.
It was Slash. It was the guitar player. And sometimes you're going to have a situation like that. He never, as far as I know, never sang, didn't even sing backup vocals. So on stage, he's not running his mouth at all, just playing guitar. But off stage, he was the guy that people would go to. And I think that every band, they're just band dynamics. If you look at them, there's the guy who talks, there's the guy who would just rather kind of sit in the background. So if you're the guy who'd rather sit in the background, get the guy who talks. There's other things. We've actually got some funny tricks in the book, Wendy, and we thought about not putting them in because they're in some ways controversial and they kind of agitate people, but about using very attractive, outgoing people to build your fan base. And I think that even if there's nobody in the band that's outgoing, that you can still do that with some of your biggest fans and let them introduce you. Hey, would you like to meet Johnny? And bring people over to you. Maybe you're just at the merch booth, and then you've got to be nice. But if you're in this business, you've got to get the gigs. You can't be a complete wallflower. I think if you're a complete wallflower, you're probably not even playing live. You're probably still doing it on YouTube, and maybe you're even afraid of that.
Okay. So now give some tips on how to connect with fans. So you've won over the staff. Everybody's cool about you being there. How do you make those connections with fans so that after the gig is done, people are talking about you and also want to come and see you play again?
Okay, so let's say you're playing a brand new venue. I mentioned this earlier, and it's worth mentioning it again just because we get into the list. You're a brand new venue. I think either getting the band that you are opening up for, if that's the case, or finding one of the regulars, somebody that the crowd knows, if you're not really well known, to kind of give you that introduction, vouch for you. It's what we call social proof. So if this person who has some kind of credibility thinks you're cool, therefore everybody else is more easily swayed that you're cool, and that's going to give you just a huge boost, before you're even starting. Now we've all been to those shows, because this is how new bands are broken, where you are a band and you're opening for, let's say, Justin Bieber, just one of the biggest guys out there, and you've got this new teeny bopper band, and you're going to open for him. People don't know, they bought the tickets because they wanted to see Justin Bieber, not because of you. And I think that what you can do just to win people over, this sounds so simple. And I think when I listen back to these podcasts and the advice that we're giving, when it all is simple, but people aren't doing it. But the best thing that you can do is just to play your game. And we've got a whole chapter in the book about this, playing your game and how important that is. You're not trying to be Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber is already on the show, and he's doing his thing. If people wanted to see him, they would see him, and they will see him. So you just need to do what it is that you do best and go out there, like the old saying, dance like no one's watching. Do your thing, and I think that's contagious. And if you've got that introduction, and if you're doing what it is that you're doing, I think it's going to be, maybe the front row at first that can really get into it, and eventually you are going to win them over, and you'll just get better. It's a developed skill. Okay,
let's back up here because you segued really quickly from one point to another. So back up. So final thoughts about playing a new venue. The gist of what I heard you say about that was that basically that you hone in on the people who are regulars, or, hopefully maybe some of your fans will be like if you're playing, let's say you're on tour and you're playing a completely new venue that you've never been to before. You, again, make those allies, whether they be regulars or maybe you have some fans that, let's say, heard about you online who come to see you once that you come to their town, and you make connections with them with the hope that they will be like your spokespeople, if you will.
Well, you have that, but beyond that, what it is that I think that you're doing when you're in a brand new town, what you're doing is you're showing respect for the town. For example, I'm in Nashville, you're in Toronto, and if I'm up there, this is just a kind of a funny example, but biggest sport in Toronto, what is it?
Hockey,
right? So if I'm going to come in there, maybe I'm wearing a Toronto jersey,
right?
You're just giving acknowledgement that, hey, this is kind of like you did with the sound guy. You're saying, I am not home, but I respect your home.
Okay.
I'm not going to go in a Catholic church and start chanting in Sanskrit. That's not the language they speak in the Catholic Church. When you're in the Catholic Church, you're going to be, doing it in Latin, right?
Right.
So you're showing respect for the town. You're showing respect for the people there. You're showing respect for the venue and the culture there. Okay. So I think, like I'm in Nashville. I'm not saying you got to wear like cowboy hats and a cowboy boots, but at the same time, man, if it works for you, have fun with it. This is why you go to these concerts, and this is really what the book is about. This is me breaking down the psychological aspects of marketing, because people say, "Oh, yeah, I know this," but this is exactly why that this happens. This is exactly why when you go to New York City and you're watching Paul Stanley of Kiss, how many times in his stage rants is he going to acknowledge that he's in New York City? Mm-hmm. And how many times is he going to acknowledge that not only is he in New York City is awesome, and they're the loudest crowd he's ever been with, mm-hmm. and they aren't nearly as cool as the guys that he was playing with last night. So that's how you win over the crowd. You show them that you're one of them, you're on the same team, sometimes literally, like in the example of the Toronto jersey, and you're playing their game.
Okay, so then you started talking about what to do if you're playing at wherever it is that you're playing, in a club or whatever, and you happen to be the opening act for a really popular band or act, and that most people are kind of indifferent to you.
Indifferent, right? And that's where you need to be authentic. This is what we talked about. You're playing your game. And you're going to do it regardless. And I think this happens too when we talk about indifference. Sometimes you're going to go to a venue and there's nobody there, even on the best days. So, maybe the town caught on fire or something, or there's like a national emergency. There's just nobody there. And when I say nobody, maybe a few people.
Or everybody's home watching the hockey game.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or Formula One if you're in South America. Everybody's got their thing, right?
Right.
So you're going to do the same show, and you're going to be indifferent, and you're going to give these guys a kick-ass show. I see so many bands, and you've seen them, Wendy, everybody's seen them, where it's like they start blaming the audience. Come on, guys, you're as quiet as church mice out there. Make some noise, people. Hey, that's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to get them so they're going to join in with you, and it starts with you. So I think that's the biggest way to get an indifferent crowd up there. I mean, even if there's only 5 or 6 people in there, like I've been to a lot of shows and maybe 20% sold out. Look, I don't want you to be bitching about the promoter up there. And I don't want you to be, insulting the crowd and the people who did come. And I don't want to know about the venue that you were at last night when you were in front of 50,000 people. Okay, you got 5,000 people here tonight. Give us a show. We're the true fans. We deserve it. And if you do that, I'm going to respect you even more, and so will your audience.
So in terms of that kind of connection, making that kind of connection on stage, because that's kind of what you've been talking about primarily, is how to make those connections on stage and make everybody feel like they're, a part of the show.
Yeah.
So can you give a couple of tips on how, like, more creative ways to be able to make those connections? I mean, you mentioned the shout outs and that kind of thing.
Well, let's say it's a small crowd, which is the problem, like I was saying, to be indifferent to. So a small crowd, you can have a lot of fun with those guys. You can actually, it's an intimate setting. You can get to know them. And believe me, some of these guys listening to this podcast, they've got really small crowds, especially if you're just starting out. You're going to go to like a coffee shop. They got venues here in Nashville and all over. I'm sure Toronto, where if you've got 20 people in there, it's like a big deal. It's packed. And that's where you should be playing when you're starting out, because you want it to look packed. And that's a whole lot better than 30 people in a venue that holds 50. So if you've got a small crowd, I think more interaction, taking requests, giving away CDs, showing them that appreciation, showing them that you're working hard. I think those are the kind of things that you can do to win people over, because again, it's kind of like being indifferent to the crowd, like I mentioned earlier, or indifferent to the size of the crowd. I think that when people see that you're in there working hard and really trying to make those connections, and they're going to walk away feeling like they know you, a small crowd is the best time to do that. Sometimes you can't do that in a large crowd. Go look at like the Live Aid tapes or some of these Michael Jackson concerts. It's a different game. He can't make those kind of connections that you can. So really you should be excited that you're able to play those small crowds and get those kind of relationships going now.
Okay. So we're running out of time, but the other thing too that comes to mind, and maybe we'll do our next podcast about this, is when I think of connecting with fans, I also think of what can you do to be able to stay in touch with those fans? Like, how do you get their information? What is it that you need to do to be able to ensure that connection, like I think I mentioned before, continues on even after the gig? And I'm guessing like that, again, you can't just throw out one or two things. That's a whole other podcast.
You want me to?
But, well, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is one of the ones, and this is perfect because the book is free, musicianbook.com. Just go there. You can get it, and it dives into this a little bit more deeply. But it talks about if you're shy and having a person go around and hype you up and also sign people up to your mailing list. And one of the ways that you can get people excited and keep that connection is you can take photos and say, like, hey, listen, if you want a photo, I've got this up. We're going to put this up on the Facebook page. Here's how to do it. Just give me your email address. I'll send this photo to you. We're recording the show live. I can send you a tape of this experience.
Maybe. A tape? Seriously?
That's how we still talk in Nashville, Wendy. We're still records and tapes. I can send you an MP3.
Like a private link or something?
Yeah, I can send you a download of this, a recording, let's say that. I can send you a recording of this, and that sounds, people are like, recordings, that's a dime a dozen, but what you're doing is you're capturing an experience, and that's when somebody, it's not just like photos of a show. It's a photo of a show somebody was at. And it's not just a recording of a show. It's a recording of a show somebody was at. So if I'm there with my first date of a girl that I'd really like to marry, and you've got that show, that's a memory for me. And I'd like to see that photo. So of course I'm going to give you the email address. And of course I'd like to hear that recording, because you can hear me shouting or singing along in the recording. And it's very, very easy to record shows these days. It's certainly easy to, it's not like we're using film or anything. Just get somebody out there with a digital camera. You can upload that stuff that night. Tag it, Nashville Club ABC, and put the date there, and there you go. And your true fans are going to want to see all those. I mean, who doesn't like to look at photos of beautiful people? We have a magazine here, it's called In Focus, N stands for Nashville. All it is a bunch of rich people.
Okay.
All it is photos. People love looking at photos. So I think that's a great way to do it.
I'm going to put you on the spot really quick.
Yep.
So one of the things that comes to mind is what I personally like, and I'm going to guess I'm not the only one, is to know that I'm getting something exclusive. And I think it's kind of cool that if I liked a band and they said, hey, you know, just because you showed up and you're a fan, that we're going to give you this, like, you know, private link or exclusive link that nobody else is going to have for a while. You know, I'm guessing that, like, if it's a video of the show, I'm not sure if, I don't know, maybe like a fan would like to see like a replay of the show and know that just the people who were there have access to it and no one else. I mean, do you know where I'm going with that? Like,
there's a lot of things that you can do, and there's a lot of little things that you can bounce off to make that more exclusive. Let's say, for example, I'm going to keep on the Canadian Justin Bieber theme. And let's say that I'm in like a punk rock band, and we thought it would be funny to just do a cover of Justin Bieber, and we play it, and we've got a recording of it, and it's a little bit quirky, and it just goes just to the people that are at that show. All right. Well, the next night maybe we're in Detroit, and we think, well, maybe we need to do a Kid Rock cover, or maybe we need to do a Ted Nugent cover, or something. I mean, that if you want to talk about getting connected with like the local heroes and stuff, and not that like everybody in Detroit likes Kid Rock and Insane Clown Posse and Ted Nugent, but I think it's just kind of a funny shout out to show that you respect the culture, right? Or that you know something about it. People are going to start talking, hey, did you see the Detroit show? Did those guys do a funny cover that time? Oh man, what was it? And then you got people talking, and they're going to be starting to trade it. But you only give it out to a limited number of people initially. And you can do things like that. I mean, there's T-shirts. Obviously, when your crowds get bigger, you can have 50 limited edition T-shirts. You can do CDs. You can do all sorts of limited edition stuff that I think you can do. And this is just the very basic level. And I'm not saying to do this, but I'm saying to get in the habit of thinking about it. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, so we've got to wrap it up. So plug the book one more time.
Well, the book, Six Figure Musician. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. But for you, free at musicianbook.com. Go get a download, and we spent a lot of time on it, Wendy. I appreciate your help on it. It wouldn't have been in existence if it weren't for you. And people can see all of our work, and they can learn how to make more money in the music business, sell more records, get more people to their shows.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we're going to do more podcasts in the future, more interviews, more tips like this, and have fun with this podcast as well. And if anybody has any questions or comments, email us at musicmarketingpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll answer any questions that you have, or, whatever, address whatever issues you may have. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing all of those tips and everything, David.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting.
All right. See you guys next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. If you have any questions or comments, email David and Wendy at musicmarketingpodcast@gmail.com. To listen to past shows and get even more music marketing advice, visit musicmarketing.com.